From the Autodesk University 2009 in Las Vegas, I'm Dave Graveline. Welcome to another virtual interview for AU. We have with us Terry Bennett. He's the Senior Industry Manager for Civil Engineering and Construction with Autodesk. Terry, your topic, as I understand, is sustainable infrastructure and the role of civil engineers for sustainability. So first of all, let's set the stage by asking, from a civil engineer's point of view, what is infrastructure and how is it that you're applying that to everything that you do?
Well, that's a good question, Dave. If we look around us, we mostly focus around buildings. We see a lot of buildings when we talk about sustainability, but infrastructure to us is everything that supports that type of vertical construction. So if you look at all the roads, the highways, sewer and water systems, subway systems, mass transit, high-speed rail, everything that helps move people and or materials around, coupled with delivering things like electricity and power grids, is all the supporting infrastructure. And from our perspective is that even though there's a lot of focus in and around making buildings much more efficient, there's also a similar type of initiative around infrastructure. As we know, the infrastructure that we have has been old. It's been designed, most of it 100 years ago. We have reports daily and even globally of infrastructure failing, water pipes breaking, bridges coming down. And what we're looking at is not only rebuilding the infrastructure to be much more sustainable, which in many cases is much longer lasting, much more resilient, but doing so with the eye towards where the future of the infrastructure is going to be. So, I mean, a quick example is if you look at the urbanization rate, by around 2050, many reports show that 70% of the world's population is going to be in an urban center.
Wow.
So when you start looking at the move away from today, which is 53% urbanization, to 70%, it's not that we're going to roughly do a 25 to 30% more cities, but how do we look at the infrastructure to be able to handle that much of an influx in people?
And what's interesting is that that's a heck of an impact on not only that existing infrastructure, but what may be planned for future, even from that point on. And how do you deal with it?
Absolutely, and that's what's really key. Is one of the goals of what we're trying to do is to produce technology that enable our customers to understand what is that future impact. How do you design things differently and think about the context of where civil engineering and the projects that civil engineers build is going to look like, given that backdrop of where the focus is going to be. How do you move people around in a city when you have that much of a population explosion? It's not building more highways, because obviously it's too small, but it's really looking at the problem from that standpoint.
And in your background materials that you provided, you noted that several major legislative mandates and executive orders, along with sustainability efforts, are driving widespread energy usage reform and encouraging building owners and operators to actually get involved and renovate and improve their building performance. So what are those driving forces? Is it mandated laws? Is it otherwise concerns that we've got to do something and we should do it now?
I think it's a combination of both. I mean, obviously with some of the news reports today around, did the global warming information get massaged slightly? But it still doesn't remove the problem, is that if we design things the same way we had 50 to 75 years ago, the rate of failure is going to be just another 50-year process. So we've got to rethink not only those, and that's what some of these mandates are driven to, is to reduce energy consumption. Whether that's on buildings or anything else, but obviously water supply is a huge impact. We have limited water. It's one of the scarcest resources, and as people move in, we need a better way of treating the water. And it's a combination of not only just treating more water, but if you use less, it gives more available for consumption. Mm-hmm. So it's a combination of factors, and I think what we're going to see is engineers and architects working much closer together as really collaborative approaches to building much more sustainable infrastructure in communities that minimize the waste and optimize the use, because we just can't obviously just throw water at everybody, right, with that many billions of people, because the population's rising.
And of course, it sounds like these building owners are realizing that solving one problem is actually contributing to solving others as well as they continue to do this.
Right, and so as people move into population centers, as we redo the buildings, we have to redo how to get people there. And that's where concepts like transit-oriented development, which is co-locating buildings and shopping centers and the things you need daily within walking distance of where you live, so that you don't have to use a car to go get milk, right? Yeah. Those types of things that put more stress on the system. And if you can co-locate the infrastructure centers with the building centers, it helps minimize the impact on the overall environment and your footprint.
Well, Terry, what specifically do you think civil engineers can be doing to help revitalize our nation's infrastructure?
Well, I think a lot of it comes down to education. Civil engineers for a long time have always thought sustainably. They looked at better ways of using water, in sewer systems, but we haven't looked at it in the context of teaching people the right approaches. I mean, in many cases, we've seen a really good job of architects and others taking the lead on buildings because they are the highest polluters. But transportation comes in at second, like 23%. So it's really educating people on a different way of doing it. And I think the timing is right in the fact that most of the people that are going to decide where they're going to live are the 25 to 35-year-olds, the people who are really focused around sustainability. So you have this nexus where education on the civil engineering standpoint of why we do these things. Why do we need a rail transit system in the middle of a city rather than roads? When they go to these public hearings and say, well, we don't understand why you need that. Well, here's why. And it's a lot of it's really educating.
And what technology is available these days to help make this happen?
Well, we have a lot of really good modeling technologies, and that's where BIM comes in. I mean, it's really looking at redesigning the way we approach projects. It's not just lines, arcs, and circles and drafting. We're actually be able to model, visualize, and simulate what if we did this, what are the results? And if we don't like that, come back to it, change the model, and see what the implications are by moving it around and changing it and getting real-time feedback. It's not well, we'll take the best guess and hope it works because we know it's worked in the past. That's repeating what we did for the last 100 years. So it's really to provide visualization tools, analysis tools to look at it from that perspective, and better design tools that allow them to really take these ideas of, hey, we could try this, what does it look like, and give them the ability to do that visually so that if they're going to fail in an infrastructure design, they fail on the desktop, not on the construction site.
Right. Certainly Autodesk providing those tools, being a major player in helping to solve these problems, as you say, before they start building the actual structure.
Right, and we've got a lot of good examples of customers for our civil engineering products, things like Civil 3D, where they're able to say, what if we did this? And then be able to see those results real time, and it's much easier to make a correction during the design than after the construction has already started. That's very expensive.
Yeah, very true. And they'd much rather look to you to help them way before those expenses begin to incur.
Yeah, I mean, engineers that's what they got into the profession for, is to change things and make them better. We're just providing tools that enable them to understand what that vision means, give them the feedback, and then have them, make that process much simpler for them.
Then speaking of those engineers, what do you think is the next big trend in order to help them with revitalizing sustainability and handling these issues? What are we looking forward to?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of good set of systems being put in place. For example, starting with any project, you got to start with existing ground information, and traditionally it was surveyors going out and collecting one point at a time. Now we have the ability to do large-scale scanning and laser scanners where you actually scan and get a three-dimensional model from the scan, billions of points that really look like what's out there. You have designs that are now able to do the design based on that information. You're able to simulate the construction process to find out collisions and mistakes on the desktop that you would normally find out in the field, and then correct them so that the sequencing when you go to build infrastructure is much more streamlined, and help recover some of that plus or minus 20% of cost of a project that's raised due to waste and errors and omissions and mistakes in the field, and fold that back in and remove that and streamline it. And then things like construction automation, right? You see the cool machines out there with GPS receivers sitting on the top. Mm-hmm. That's so they can actually grade and construct the surface models. And we've seen a lot of firms be able to reduce their fuel consumption by 43% year over year by not having to sit there and idle waiting for somebody to put a grade stake in.
Wow.
Right? Plus they're grading to a much higher accuracy, which means less material being moved around.
Sure.
So it's that type of using a model by which to facilitate the design rather than paper, because everybody can understand something that's a model. You can see it, you can understand it. A roll of papers, well, that takes a different level of expertise to understand what this roll of papers is really going to look like.
Yes.
Right? So a lot of it is just better understanding of what the objectives are from the whole team's perspective.
Well, we can certainly see, Terry, while you're involved with the civil engineering and construction end of things, and it certainly is in your heart.
Absolutely.
You're passionate about this, and of course, the fact that others are becoming more and more passionate about proper design before they begin to construct is making a huge difference.
Yeah, and it's not, it's kind of in summary, it's not that they were doing what they were doing is wrong.
Sure.
There was not enough tools to enable them to really think through what they were trying to. They thought about it, but had no way to approach it. And we're just now being able to enable that thought process for them and bring it visual to them.
Excellent. The fact that Autodesk is providing the tools. Keep up the good work. And Terry, thanks for spending a few minutes with us here at AU.
Glad to, Dave. Thank you very much.